This is TWiT.
It's funny, we're talking about the weather like old friends who have nothing to say to one another.
You know,
But
Mike
in fact-
Hurley on the Upgrade podcast, he had to make a segment called Snell Talk, where we talk about something other than the weather that is suggested by a listener, because otherwise it was always going to be the weather. So we're steering out into the skid. You steer into the skid, right?
sorry,
There's a new iPhone.
there is a story.
Kind of.
There is a story.
You could go. It's being sold as an iPhone. That's technically
It's
correct.
made from various old parts and one new part, and sold as a new iPhone. Yes.
Bloomberg, Mr. Mark Gurman, says Apple is abandoning the smartphone budget market with the 16E. It's true. It's $600, $179 or $170 more than the old SE.
Yeah, I'm keep trying to figure out how I feel about that. I think what I've landed on after a week is that it's okay that it's a damn shame, but it's okay that Apple is no longer making a budget phone. The 16E is definitely just simply the least expensive iPhone in the lineup. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's also like, yikes. I mean, I don't know. I've been spending the past few days comparing what $600 in an iPhone 16e will give you versus what $600 in a Google phone or a Google Pixel phone or a Samsung phone or a nothing phone and Android will give you. They're much bigger. You get a lot more value on the Android side of the fence, even if you don't want to go as low as $300 or $400. And I'm just trying to figure out exactly who the 16E is for, and I haven't decided yet what it is.
I guess my question also is how many people, now I buy the phone, like I just buy the phone and then I trade them in, I do whatever, but it seems like a lot of the carriers are giving you the phone. I mean, all the way up to a 16 Pro with your membership. So I don't know. I think part of this whole thing is that a lot of people are eligible for upgrades or they're getting them with their service. And so I'm not sure that the number, I don't know how many people are paying for that in cash. Again, I pay for mine in cash, but I don't know how many people do that.
Well,
I
in
guess
different countries, it can be different, but like
Right.
I think here's this is going to be terrible because it's nuanced. But Ben Thompson at Stratechery actually did. I know on the internet.
I'm not going to listen to this garbage.
Can we talk about the weather instead, please?
And what Ben Thompson at Stratechery pointed out, like he looked at iPhone SE prices using, basically taking inflation out of it, right? So that you could the real value, real cost. And you think that he's winding up to say, see, it's actually about the same. It's not. It's still a price increase. It's just not as much of one as the 40% price increase makes it look like a lot. But I will say, I think a couple things are going on here. One is Apple really wanted to move their entire phone line to the essentially 7-year-old iPhone 10 platform, where you've got OLED, you've got the notch, so it really is the iPhone 10. You've got Face ID instead of making Touch ID. They've had that on the production line for a long time, but it's probably more expensive than the old Face or old Touch ID and non-OLED display was. And there's that. And then there's Apple Intelligence, which, love it or not, like Apple has decided all of its new models have to have Apple Intelligence support.
I think that's the real reason.
And so I think you put those two things together, and the bill of materials for this thing is way higher than the old SE was. And you know what? Apple is they're not going to turn down their traditional profit margin on hardware. They're just not. And so here we are. It does create an interesting kind of like, $599, $699, $799, $899, $999 kind of price spread on iPhones that Apple is currently selling. But and the other thing Ben Thompson pointed out is, if you look, we've all been feeling like the SE was a good way for Apple to have an entry into selling a new phone in some markets that do not have the buying power of the big industrialized nations. The evidence is not as strong on that count. And this may also be Apple sort of admitting that these are the phones that Apple sells, are the phones that are in this class, and they don't sell a $420 phone is not really what Apple's entire game is.
Yeah.
Two questions.
I was talking to
two questions. Hold on. Is this an example of Apple preparing ahead of time for incoming tariffs? Like they want to build the tariff in?
I can't imagine that they would have done that 3 years ago. I think that this.
They avoided tariffs 3 years ago, though.
Yeah. Well, but I think that this
you think they'll avoid them this time?
I just think that this is more of a world phone. I was talking to another analyst a few days ago who was developing the theory that it's not a single market phone by any means, but part of the mandate of the 16E was we have to have a phone that will compete in China, where they have amazing, not necessarily cheap phones, but mid-level phones. And so that if it's okay for Apple to be the, hey, you want to buy you thought you wanted to buy a Huawei phone, but for even $100 less, you can get the prestige of this wonderful luxury
and of
brand.
course,
Apple
tariffs
with
in
all
China, right? So
yeah,
they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, Apple could reprice it later if they really need to, but I think that's one of the things.
That would piss off the president.
That's why they call it money. I would say it's a little bit
diplomatic here, right?
I would say, instead of that's why they call it money, I would say that's why they have the profit margins. That's they can afford some fluctuation, and they do that. They talk a lot about how they get hit by foreign exchange a lot. Tariffs is not foreign exchange, but it's a similar kind of cost that can happen. And that, honestly, that is one of the things they do with having their margins where they are, is they don't have to float the prices internationally as much as you might think that they do. I'm sure if they got hit by tariffs, they would figure out a way to deal with it. I don't think that's the story here. I think that this is the convergence of wanting to go to an OLED Face ID platform where I think that hardware is more expensive. Even now, I think it's more expensive than what was on that model, and having to do Apple Intelligence because they want to bring parity. They have to. They don't want to sell a phone to people who might at this price point, buy it for 5 years and say, yeah, but this doesn't have all of the stuff we've just been advertising to you for the last 6 months.
There are some concessions. There are some things missing. But let me get to the second question, then we'll talk about what's missing. Second question is, do they not still sell older iPhones at a lower cost? Are those off the...
Not really. Yeah.
That's it.
In the US, it's just the 15, which is $100 more than this.
Oh, so there's nothing cheaper than this.
No, the 14 was at this price point, I believe, or was at the 100 up price point, and they've replaced the 14. I was talking to my colleague Dan Morin about this last week, and he suggested it's possible that they're even literally using the production line for the 14 to make this phone, right? You just flip it over, because they were selling new 14s, even though it's a 2-year-old phone, and they are still selling new 15s, and that's how they get that 100 up price point. So with no Apple Intelligence support, which is kind of weird, but you got to do what you got to do. Yeah. So I think
the other thing, the benefit is that these look like binned A18 chips. In other words, A18s that were made for the Pro, but didn't pass muster because
one of their cores isn't working, so you can sell it as a -1 core CPU.
So and this happens all the time in manufacture. You have you test the chips that come off the wafer, and if they are not up to snuff, you put them in different bins capable. Depending on their capabilities. And in this case, Apple doesn't really have a place to put binned chips. So maybe this gives them a way to sell them. Maybe they have a bunch of A18s without the 4th core GPU.
I think Apple doesn't really talk about what's in the Apple TVs.
Right. Well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are places they can put it.
It's all like, that's the bottom bin.
It's all part of their plan too, right? Like, I mean, the story of Apple Silicon, we can talk about this a little later with the one new thing that's in this phone, but part of the Apple Silicon plan all along is Apple knows where they're going to use those chips. They know what models they're going to go in, and I think at this point they know where they're going to use the binned versions of those chips too, and they've got a whole little strategy of this will go in the Pro phone, and this will go in the non-Pro, and this will go in the E, and this will go in an Apple TV or an iPad, and they have this kind of plan about where all of those chips, including the ones that are tossed in the bin, are going to go.
So they did discontinue the SE, right? So that's gone.
It's gone, and and the 14, yeah.
Interesting.
That is a little bit heartbreaking. $430 for an iPhone to get you in the door. It's either to get you in the door or to make sure that everyone in your family can use the same services, the same content, the same parental controls. I thought that was a pretty important thing. But
you've always said that, Alex, that the kids get the cheaper iPhones.
Oftentimes
what do families do if there's no cheap iPhone anymore?
Well, I think that some of the math might also be that they look at what you end up buying, because whatever the base price is, you go in and go, oh, it's $449, and that gets you in the door, as Andy said. But then but by the time you go, oh, I really need a little more RAM, or I need a little bit more of that, they're seeing
good, better, best.
Yeah. So so I think that they oftentimes find that people aren't buying that lowest cost one, and if they are, oftentimes they're shifting over to even lower cost Android phones.
So there are two things gone now from the Apple lineup. One is the home button. There are no Apple iPhones that have home buttons anymore,
which is unfortunate. I still like the home. I still like the fingerprint better than the facial.
I do too.
Yeah.
And actually, I really use the fingerprint on the iPad Mini In fact, when I need to use my password manager, I prefer to use the mini because I can use a fingerprint instead of, especially in bed at night, going like this. And the thing is, I was wearing this hat.
It'll make me raise my head
It was
6
wearing
inches.
this hat, and it didn't know who I was.
Yep.
So, you know.
Whoa, where'd Leo go?
Someone broke into the studio with Leo's credentials.
You see, even you don't know who the hell I am when I wear that. So I miss that. And the Lightning, there's no more. The only thing with Lightnings, are they still selling the iPad? No, there's nothing with the Lightning anymore, right?
No, no,
That's it?
No, I think that's it. I think
Throw out all your Lightning cables, kids. You don't need them anymore unless you got some old AirPods or something.
And there's a third one, although in a technicality, the iPhone 14 was the last iPhone, pretty much the last device Apple was making that was sold in a Project Red configuration.
Oh, that's sad. I love those red phones.
It's not so the Project Red line is not completely done. You can still buy a Project Red iPhone 14 case, but oh well.
It may come back. Who knows? It may be.
It may.
I love what they said about the 16E in terms of the colors. It says so much about Apple's attitude toward this. It's like, yeah, look, iPhone 15 comes in lots of colors. iPhone 16, lots and lots of colors. Oh, the 16E, well, you can get it in black or white.
Is that it? Really?
You want color, you got to pay, buddy. Color, you got to pay.
Wow.
Simplify the line. It probably also looks at what the vast majority of people they're aiming for the middle. I bet you it's I bet you they're hitting 90% of the market.
Unobjectionable.
With black and white.
Uninteresting, but unobjectionable.
Any color you want, as long as it's black or white.
Lowercase on it.
Not colors.
I oscillate myself between dark gray and black. like those are the two that I generally buy. So.
Yeah. Actually, what color? I don't even know because I have a
case. Because I was the same thing.
It's that cream thing.
There was one time that I bought you know what? It was like. It was that winter in New England where it was absolutely, we were getting dumped with snow every 3 days. It was never ending. And like sometime around January, I said, you know what? I need a little color and some bright, I'm going to get a pink phone case. And I got this lovely pink phone case and I loved it until I was taking pictures with it. And the pink, if there's any kind of a reflection in a shot, it will show up in that reflect. So that's why it has to be a black case from now on.
I have the same problem with this hat. Actually, I don't understand why.
Who are you? He got back in. Lockdown.
I got this on vacation.
That does look like that checks out. That does look like a hat that someone buys on vacation.
For people who are listening, it's I don't know, how would you describe it?
It's a very stylish.
One of the Pope's Swiss guards if he's going clubbing later that night.
It looks like AI designed this. Is what it looks like. It's an AI watermelon.
Hey, focus up. That is what I said to Hands on Tech when we looked at the relaunch. It is time for us to focus on one topic at a time and make sure we're answering that question. I am answering that question as thoroughly as possible. If you are a member of Club TWiT, you can watch the video version of this show completely ad-free. Of course, listen to the audio version ad-free. If you're not a member, the show will still be available to you in both ways. You can watch the video on YouTube with ads, or you can watch the audio as you always have. Listen to the audio as you always have in our feeds. In any case, you gotta tune in to Hands on Tech because I guarantee there's going to be a question you're going to want to have the answer to. And from time to time, I also review a gadget, a gizmo, or something of the sort. You gotta check out Hands on Tech, and I can't wait to get your question.